Good evening, students. I hope all of you are doing good and I hope your preparation is going fine. Welcome to today's Analyst. This is 15th of March 2024 and we are here to discuss important articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, the handout of the session is there in the description box. You may utilize it to streamline your current affairs preparation. Now, the first topic for today is in relation to reforms in education system of India. The second topic is in relation to inequality, climate change and urbanization. The third topic is in relation to poverty in India. And fourth topic is in relation to the circular economy. And last but not the least is in relation to Directorate General of Foreign Trade, that is DGFT. Now coming on to the first topic. So the first topic is in relation to reforms in education system of India. Now recently CBSE has suggested open book examinations for few classes, which is why this topic, reforms in education system of India and is Indian education assessment system ready for reforms, this topic becomes very, very important. And in your general studies paper 2, education has been specifically mentioned in the social issues, in the social justice part, right? Which is why it becomes very, very important. Now coming on directly to the topic. Now, before understanding reforms in education system of India, we have to understand what are the various issues facing our education sector and what are some data points and statistics. So the first very important issue in our education sector is lower gross enrollment ratio, especially in the higher education sector. It is close to 25.8%. And we see the data over here about gross enrollment ratio in higher education in our country. In 2014-15, it was close to 24.3%. In 2019-20, it was close to 27.1%. In 2020-2021, it is close to 27.3%. So gross enrollment ratio in higher education system of India is very, very low. Now also there is inequity which is present and inequality also which is present. That is in relation to access to education. So access inequity, access inequality, whether it be between rich and poor, whether it be between rural and urban, there is access inequality which is present, access inequity also which is present. So these are the two important issues. The third issue is in relation to poor quality. That is the standard of education system in India. Now there are certain states in India, as you also might know, where the education system is so poor that you can get a PhD degree through paying 10,000 or 20,000 rupees. That is the quality of the education system. The teachers are not present in the classes. The students are not attending the classes. They are just going to the colleges for giving the examination, which shows us that in India, quality of education system is still very, very poor. If we talk about the mass education, the quality is still very poor. If we negate the IITs and IIMs, the quality still remains abysmally low. Right? So islands of excellence amidst the sea of mediocrity. That is the reality. They're having islands of excellence, that is the IITs and IIMs, amidst the seas of mediocrity. That is a very large sea of mediocrity where mediocre institutions are existing in our country in large numbers. Only few handful of institutions are very, very qualitative. So that is why this is also very much problematic. Also, there is low research and development in our country. There is a lack of research and development, and the amount of money spent by the government on research and development, even that is abysmally low. Right? That is why it is another issue in relation to the education system of our country. Lack of adequate funds. Right? Now, whenever we tell to the administration or the local area administration or the state governments that we want to build more educational institution, the primary reason which they give that we are not able to allocate funds is there is a lack of adequate funds. We are not having adequate funding. Right? That is a very problematic issue which persists in the education sector. That is, the funding in relation to education sector is not very high. If we see here, expenditure of the government on education on the basis of the GDP, the latest data of 2022-2023 says that only 2.9% of India's GDP was towards education sector, which is very, very low because it should be at least 5 to 6% for any country so that the country can become developed and transition from developing to developed so that people also get educated and people contribute to the economic growth. So we are spending very less on education sector. That is why there is lack of adequate funding as well. Now there is one more issue. It is in relation to the poor quality as well. See, if the students are getting PhDs by paying 50,000 rupees, They're getting masters by paying 20,000 rupees or 25,000 rupees, and they don't have to go to the university, they don't have to go to the colleges. Do you think those degrees will hold any value for the private sector? Will they hold any value for the private sector? The answer is no. So the people will run after the government sector jobs, right? And government sector jobs, the seats are very much limited. So if they won't get selected in the government sector jobs, which is of course very, very hard, they won't be able to go to the private sector as well, because private sector won't take the mark sheets or won't take the degrees which are awarded by the institutions who award degrees based on the basis of money, right? So private sector won't be recognizing those degrees at all, and they won't be taking students from those institutions. So students won't be able to get employed, right? So alongside the poor quality of education, there is low employability of graduates as well. First reason is, first of all, the graduates are not even going to the classes. Even though they are graduates, they have not attended 90% of the classes, right? Even though they are graduates, they don't know how to fill an Excel sheet, how to use Google Docs, how to use Microsoft Excel, how to use Microsoft Word, and how to use other softwares. Even if they're graduates, they're not aware of what is there in their discipline, right? So because of that reason, and because of institutional factor as well, because of poor quality training and teaching, there is low employability of graduates in our country. And that is again also a very, very important and a persistent issue. Also, see, it's a very general point, that is poor governance and management, right? Now, of course, it is a general point, but let's specify it, that poor governance and management in relation to institution handling, right? See, if teachers are not present in the class, it is the fault of the governance. It is the fault of the management, because management is not keen enough to put the teachers inside the classrooms, right? And management is not strict enough to oversee that are the teachers teaching relevant things in the classroom or not. Are they teaching particularly good syllabus, good curriculum in the classroom or not? Are the teachers being tested or not, right? So that is in relation to the poor governance and management, right? This is also a pain point where education system needs a overall reform, right? And last but not the least is the brain drain. Now, brain drain is not happening in India till now, right? It has been happening since 1991 and even earlier, where eminent personalities, or let's say brilliant minds of India, they're leaving India. And where are they going? They're going to US, or they're going to UK, or Australia, or Germany, or France, right? Or any other European countries. Those who can contribute to economic development of India, they are going outside. Why? Because they are getting better amenities, they're getting better facilities, they're getting good governance, they're getting good quality of life, and they're getting good paychecks as well, right? So because of all these things, talented individuals from India, skillful individuals from India, they're leaving India. Because of these lack of various amenities in India, they're leaving India and going to the developed nations, which is leading to brain drain. Why it is very wrong for our country? Because it leads to other countries growing on behest of our Indian people, but we ourselves are not growing enough, right? Of course, the reality right now is different, because UK is undergoing recession, Japan is undergoing recession, India is growing at 7% growth rate, right? But still, brain drain, if it does not happen, India can grow even faster, right? So again, this challenge, this issue also needs to be addressed. That is the whole point. Now, let us understand various government initiatives. Now, I'll be just naming those initiatives, right? And my point is that you need to understand and know about these initiatives in and out. Since these initiatives are very important, high chances of them being asked in your preliminary examination as well as mains examination, right? So this Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, this you should know what it's all about. The National Initiative for Design Innovation, right? Again, a governmental initiative for reformation in higher education in our country. Then National Research Professorship, right? Then Central Sector Interest Subsidy Scheme 2009 on Model Education Loan Scheme of IBA, right? Then your construction of girls' hostels, of course, to create parity, to create equity and equality. And supporting uncovered state universities and colleges, again, making them more conducive for the student education, especially the higher education part, right? These are the various government initiatives. Now the point is, now the whole topic, it revolves around the reforms which are required, right? That is why we are discussing all these issues. We want to discuss about the reforms in the education system of our country. So reforms here I've divided into 5 heads. If you understand these 5 heads, of course, you can draw this out in your notes as well, and you can replicate in your answer copies. It will be very readily used in your mains answer scripts as well. You'll be getting good marks if you draw this diagram, right? So first is autonomy, right? The first point which theme which I want to discuss in relation to reforms in education sector is autonomy, right? So educational institutions, this is in relation to institutional reforms. So educational institution needs to be given autonomy. But again, the point is autonomy should be added with checks and balances. Autonomy does not mean complete autonomy, that no questions will be asked from you. Autonomy means that you are autonomous, you are having autonomy, but you are also accountable to someone. Because with great power comes great responsibility, right? So autonomy should be provided to the educational institutions so that they can function themselves. They can think of their own curriculum. They can think of the ways in which they want to teach students. But of course, there should be proper checks and balances in place. So this is very important. Next one is accountability and transparency. Now, accountability factor we have already discussed. That if you are giving them autonomy, you have to make them accountable. Government have to make educational institutions accountable, right? And while making them accountable, how will they make them accountable? By making the processes very transparent. Because making educational institutions accountable to whom? First is being accountable to their master, that is the government, but also being accountable to the people as well. Because ultimately government reflects the will of the people, right? So educational institution needs to be accountable to the people. And how will they be accountable? Through transparency, right? That is why in this area, in this arena, reforms are needed. Also, in relation to employability. Now, we discussed a lot of people are getting graduated, a lot of people are getting their master's degree, still they are unemployable. Why? First, they are not attending the classes. Even if they are attending the classes, the quality of the classes is not good enough to equip them with the skills which are required for getting them employed. Which is why employability takes a setback, right? So they need to be given education which makes them employable, right? Now, coming on to the social responsibility part. So educational institutions should understand that it is their social responsibility to work towards education, towards quality education and mass education in the country. So they should be taking it as a social responsibility, right? And also one reform is needed in innovation, research and entrepreneurship. So first is making them employable, that is given, right? But also students need to be taught that you are not there just to become employees. Mostly in schools, what is taught is how to be a good employee, right? But very, very, very rarely it is taught to the students that how to be a good entrepreneur, how to employ other people, right? So that comes with research and innovation. If students are indulged in research and in innovation, they would be getting the entrepreneur skills as well. And if entrepreneurship is promoted in schools, entrepreneurship is promoted in colleges, at least we would be able to ensure that the students, they are dreaming of not becoming a job seeker, but a job giver, right? So they should be giving jobs rather than seeking jobs. That is what transformation is required in the educational system of India. So under these 5 heads, we need to transform our educational institutions and system. Right? Now, some other points I've mentioned over here, you can see it for yourself. Reducing multiplicity of regulators. There should not be multiple regulators in the country. There should be single regulator regulating the higher educational institution, single regulator for the schools, a single regulator for the colleges, all the other facilities. Right? Coming on to the National Research Foundation. Now, again, before discussing these points, I want to highlight one National Education Policy 2020. Right? So all the reforms which we are discussing, National Education Policy of 2020, it includes a lot of them, right? And this is again a remarkable step in the right direction, whereby educational institution will be overhauled and overall education system will be improved. Graduation is now going to become for 4 years rather than the previously 3 years, right? A lot of other reforms are initiated, but that is not the point. Our point is what reforms are needed. National Education Policy, they have recommended various reforms, right? But other than that, what all are needed, right? So National Research Foundation, Acting as an autonomous body, again, autonomy is important for funding, mentoring, and building the capacity of quality research in our country. Then quality education needs to be provided. That already we have discussed. How to provide quality education? Through regular monitoring of the teachers and through regular upgradation and skill enhancement of the teachers. Why students should only learn the skills? Teachers should also be learning the skills. Teachers should also be revamping themselves. They should also be learning in a way so that they make things very, very easy for the students to understand, right? So teacher education in itself is very, very important, which we are neglecting a lot. But teacher education, if you write this point in your answers as well, you'll be scoring good marks. That highlighting teacher education, importance of teacher education in overall educational environment of the country. Then student teacher ratio, again, very less talked about subject, but very, very important, that student teacher ratio need to be improved, right? So it should not be more than 30:1. That is, for every 30 children there should be one teacher, right? In several prominent universities this ratio is sometimes 4:1 as well, that of every 5 students there is one teacher, one professor, right? Several big universities like MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, right, or several other Ivy League universities, the teacher-pupil ratio is very, very less, right? But we need to move towards 30:1. R is even higher, right? So we need to reduce the student-teacher ratio. For every 30 students, it should be one teacher. Minimum this we should try to ensure. And also, of course, some general points that quality, quantity, affordability, and output of education in our country needs to be improved and needs to be taken into consideration. I hope reforms in education sector in our country are very, very clear and crystal clear in your mind. If a question comes on educational sector reforms, at least you should be able to write a minimum 7 to 8 points after this discussion, right? Now moving on to the second topic of today, that is inequality, climate change, and urban areas. Now a write-up has appeared in the newspaper talking about how inequality and climate change are to be big urban issues in the coming future, right? In relation to General Studies paper 1, where urbanization problems and remedies have directly been mentioned. In relation to General Studies paper 2, environment, ecology, and Indian economy, this topic becomes very, very important. So without further ado, let's start with the topic. Now, before understanding the synergy between inequality, climate change, and urban areas, see, there are 3 keywords which I've used over here. One keyword is inequality, one keyword is climate change, another is urban areas. Now, here the first 2 keywords are very, very important. That is how inequality and climate change are impacting urban areas. That is what we are trying to understand. So before understanding that, first of all, let us understand the individual meaning of all 3. First is inequality. So inequality simply means the phenomena of, or the situation where 2 things are not equal, right? Whether it be rural or urban, rich or poor, right? Or different castes, different religion, different societies, different communities. If there is disparity between any 2 variables, we call it as inequality, right? But here we are talking about economic and income related inequality, right? Here we're talking about economic and income related inequality. Then there is climate change. Now climate change, you all must be aware that because of the emission of greenhouse gases into the environment, okay, let me write this down as well. Because of the emission of greenhouse gases in the environment, there is the phenomena of global warming, whereby the temperature of Earth is rising, right? Now, because of this global warming and because of greenhouse gases being emitted into the environment, there are frequent floods and frequent droughts as well. That is, there are extreme weather events in the country, in the world as well. Now, these extreme weather events are pointing towards change in the climate of the world. And that is where the problem of climate change begins, that the climate of the earth is slowly changing its nature. That is the problem of climate change associated with global warming and extreme weather events. So first is inequality, income and economic. Second is climate change. Now urbanization, what does urbanization means? So urbanization means simply the process of people being transferred from rural areas, or people transferring themselves from rural areas to urban areas. So people shifting from rural to urban areas, we call that process as urbanization, where more and more urban areas are being built, right? Now, what is the relevance in Indian context? We will study, of course, the synergy between the three, that how inequality and climate change, they are impacting urbanization in our country, and what points we need to consider. So what is important for us is the relevance of it in the Indian context. So let's start with it, right? First of all, let us see inequality in Indian urban areas, right? So let's discuss about inequality in Indian urban areas. First of all, there exists socio-economic disparity in the Indian cities. You see the large cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, New Delhi, right? Or whether it be Hyderabad or a lot of other places, one thing which you will see a lot in all these places is huge slums being built. So slumization being built or being the phenomena in these cities, it's a very, very important issue. Because these cities are the symbol of urbanization in our country, but still they are having such large slums. And slums are indicator of what? Slums are indicator of poverty and impoverishment. Now, since they are the indicators of that, there exists socio-economic disparity between the cities in our country, within the cities in our country, and amongst the cities in our country. So that is one problem in relation to inequality in the Indian urban areas. Then there is income inequality, education gaps, and access to basic services. In relation to that also there is inequality, and in relation to the inequality in urban areas, this point can also be very, very feasible one. Also, marginalized communities, slum dwellers, migrant workers, and tribal populations, because of the high levels of inequality, they are present in the urban areas. And now that becomes a very big problem, because the tribal population also, they are impoverished. They're cut out from the society, and they are not getting adequate benefits which they need to get, right? Of course, migrant workers are not getting also all the benefits. They are also living in impoverishment, slum dwellers as well, and other marginalized communities as well. So that is it about inequality in urban areas. Now, what is the impact of climate change in urban areas? Now, you must have seen a lot of instances of flash floods, regular droughts in urban areas, right? So that is the synergy. Climate change exacerbates challenges in the cities first. See, because the carrying capacity, right? Let me write this down. The carrying capacity of the cities, they have reduced considerably due to urbanization. Why? Because of huge population explosion and huge concrete buildings being built in the urban areas, and huge deforestation. Because of that, carrying capacity has decreased, and because of decrease in carrying capacity, climate change exacerbates the challenges in the cities. Increased frequency of extreme weather events is there. Temperature is of course rising, because everywhere you see there is concrete buildings, right? Sea level rise is there, which can of course be seen in Maharashtra. Then water scarcity is also an issue which is there in the major urban areas. In Delhi, you can see water scarcity. The students who are living in Old Rajendra Nagar or other parts of Delhi, they would be knowing about the water scarcity problem in Delhi. In Bangalore also there is water scarcity problem, right? In Hyderabad also it is there, in Mumbai also it is there. Then vulnerability to infrastructure and marginalized communities, because of the extreme weather events, there is vulnerability to that as well. So that is the impact of climate change on Indian urban areas. Now let us see the intersection of inequality and climate change, right? That how inequality and climate change, they intersect with each other. So socio-economic disparities, which is the inequality, they are amplifying the vulnerabilities to the climate impacts. So if socio-economic disparity exists, the vulnerability of the people who are socially marginalized, their vulnerability to the climate change impact, it increases, it amplifies, right? So inequality is bad, because inequality makes people more prone to the climate change. Then poorer communities are disproportionately affected. So those who are having inequality, poorer communities, lower rungs of the society, they will be more impacted by the climate change. That is also an intersection between the two. Now, link between inadequate housing, poverty, and exposure to environmental hazards. If there is inadequate housing, houses are not built properly, which again is reflective of what? Inequality. If there is poverty, which is again reflective of inequality, then exposure to environmental hazards, which can be caused by the climate change, exposure increases a lot. So that is the intersection of inequality and climate change. Again, a very important thing for your perspective and analysis building. Then government policies and initiatives, of course, there should be a review of all those government initiatives, because you must be knowing the urban areas initiatives like Smart Cities Mission, your Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Development, then National Action Plan on Climate Change, all the other initiatives which have been launched by the government in relation to the urban areas development, right? Or for example, your this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, right? A lot of other initiatives, overview of these government strategies to address the issues needs to be done. And along with overview, a review process needs to be done, so that are these initiatives taking cognizance of this intersection and the challenges or not? That is what we need to see. Challenges and effectiveness of these policies needs to be assessed, evaluated, and then refurbished. I hope this is very, very clear to all of you. So what is required? What is required is community resilience and adaptation. So grassroots initiatives which can address inequality and climate change, they need to come up. So grassroots initiative needs to be there. Then urban agriculture should be promoted. Renewable energy projects should be promoted, which of course we are already doing. For example, sponge cities project, right? Or concept of sponge cities, it should be promoted in India, right? Then climate resilient infrastructure needs to be built. Then importance of community participation and empowerment needs to be understood by the people, right? And what are the different case studies? For Chennai's rainwater harvesting case study needs to be inculcated and shown to the people in the country. Then Ahmedabad's heat action plan, again it needs to be shown to the people of the country, different peoples of the country, so that they can take in the lessons and best practices and they can learn from them, right? Pune's inclusive urban development initiatives. So these kind of case studies needs to be promoted throughout the country, so that people learn from them and implement these case studies in real life, right? Now, what is the future perspective? What is the way forward? Way forward is that there is a need of integrated approach in India's development agenda. We need to move towards a sustainable urban planning, sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and equitable resource access. That is, resources are accessed by everyone equitably, right? And also there should be a call for collective action from policymakers, communities, and your civil society. Now, this is an ideal way forward, ideal conclusion which you can write in your answers. It includes the substantive points as well. It is positive, futuristic as well. And that is what, as civil servants, as future civil servants, UPSC expects from you, right? So this kind of way forward, this kind of conclusion can be seen in your answer scripts. If you want to write this down, if you want to note this down in your notes, you can very well do so. Now, coming on to the third topic of today, again a very important and interesting topic, that is poverty in India, right? Now, again, a write-up has appeared in relation to the statistics of poverty in India. And the question is, has poverty really dropped to 5% in India? But our question would be, the relevance of poverty in India, the issues and the problems faced by the poor people in our country. That is more important. So the broader picture becomes very, very important for us, right? So in relation to General Studies Paper 3, Indian economy, inclusive growth, we all know it is very important. In relation to the social issues as well, it becomes important. We need to first understand, what is this term known as poverty, right? Now, we all hear this term day in and day out, and usually there is a tendency that we associate poverty only with economic sense. So with economic sense, with economic sphere, we associate the term poverty. But is it really so? I would say, if you broaden the term, broaden the horizon, poverty can also be seen as a social, economic, as well as a political phenomenon as well. See, poverty and deprivation go hand in hand. If you are deprived, there are high chances you are poor, right? So deprivation in economic sense, that you're not having enough money, enough wealth, you might be considered poor. Deprivation in the social sector. For example, you're not able to participate fully in the society. You're socially marginalized. For example, the Dalits, right? They can be considered socially poor. For example, if you're politically marginalized, there is segregation, and you're not allowed to vote, you're not allowed to stand in elections, you're not allowed to be elected. In that case, you are suffering from maybe political poverty, administrative poverty. So poverty is multifaceted. The nature of poverty is multidimensional. It is not unidimensional. That is why multidimensional analysis of the term poverty and the phenomena of poverty needs to be done. Now, Professor Amartya Sen, Nobel laureate, he has given a capability approach, which also talks a lot about different capabilities which an individual should have in order to have a good standard of living. And if an individual is not able to achieve any of the capabilities, that person will be considered as a poor person, right? So that is capability approach of Amartya Sen. Now let us see some statistics. I hope meaning of poverty and the nature of poverty is very, very clear to all of you. It is not unidimensional, that is just economic. It is multidimensional phenomena, right? Now, according to Multidimensional Poverty Index, a report by Niti Aayog, right, in 2021, it says 25%, close to 25% of India's population is multidimensionally poor. Now, there is something which World Bank also says. World Bank says that the number of extremely poor people in India, it has decreased by 12.3% between 2011 and 2019. In these 8 to 9 years, 12.3% has been the decline in the number of extremely poor people in our country. That is what World Bank says. Now, in relation to the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, first, we saw the Multidimensional Poverty Index by Niti Aayog. This is the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index 2022. It says 415 million individuals in India were able to escape multidimensional poverty in the last 15 years. A very, very important data set should be there in your introductions or bodies whenever a question in relation to inequality and poverty comes in your mains, right? So, in the last 15 years, 415 million individuals have been pulled out of poverty, right? And 18.7% is classified as vulnerable to the multidimensional poverty, which was 260 million people in 2020. So this data set, or these three data sets in particular, you should remember in relation to the poverty part. Now, if you have to know state specific, just for your information, I've included that states with high poverty rates in our country. First is Bihar with more than 50% poverty rate. Then it is Jharkhand with more than 40% poverty rate. Then it is UP with more than 35%, that is close to 37% poverty rate. Then there is Madhya Pradesh with more than 35%, specifically 36% poverty rate. And then there is Meghalaya with 32% poverty rate. So all these 5 states, they are the states with the highest poverty levels in our country. That is your Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, Madhya Pradesh and Meghalaya. And the states with the less poverty rate or the least poverty rate in our country, first is Kerala, where only 0.7% of the people are poor. Then it is Goa, where 3% of the people are poor. Then it is Sikkim, where the poverty rate is 3.8%. Then Tamil Nadu, where it is 4.8%. And Punjab, where it is 5.5%. Right? So, states with lower poverty, it is Kerala, Goa, Sikkim, Tamil Nadu and Punjab. I hope again it is very, very clear to all of you. Now, these images which I have included, first of all, this image, right? Now, this image, first of all, let me give a name to it. It reflects vicious cycle of poverty. It reflects vicious cycle of poverty. Now, what is vicious cycle of poverty? Let us see it. First, let's say you are having lower income. Your income is very low. You will be considered poor, definitely, yes. And if your income is low, can your savings be high? No, your savings will also be lower. If your income is low, your savings are also low. Can you invest? Of course not. So your investments will also be low. And if we take it into account, for all the individual poor people in the country, their income would be low. That is why they are poor, right? And their savings will be also low because they are poor only. And because their savings are low, their investments will also be lower. And if overall investments are lower in the economy, there will be lower per capita income in the country. If there is lower per capita income in the country, then there is lower productivity in the country also. And there is low per capita capital in the country also because of lower investment. There is low per capita income, low per capita capital. Because of that, there will be lower productivity in the economy. Production will not be taking place. Production will be less. Because of production being less, there will be lower employment in the country also. Because of lower employment, again, the wages will be lower and the cycle will continue, the spiral will continue, and this is what we call as vicious cycle of poverty, where a person gets trapped in the poverty. And with this, we have to understand this, what we call as poverty trap. Again, similar to the vicious cycle of poverty. What is poverty trap? So first of all, there will be lower economic growth. Now let's start with the lower income. Let's say a person is having lower income, person is poor, right? Now let's say a person is poor, of course there will be low savings as discussed. Now because there will be low savings, there will be low investment. Now since investment will be lower, production will also be reduced, and ultimately there will be lower economic growth in the country, which will ultimately lead to lower income of the people only. So again, a trap is there. Poverty trap. Now let us see one more trap. That is, there is low income. Because of lower income, there will be lower level of education and healthcare in the country. Education and healthcare will be low. Because of that, there will be lack of human capital development in the country. And if human capital is not developed in the country, there will be lower productivity. Because of lower productivity, there will be no jobs. Because of that, ultimately, again, the income would be lower. So again, it is reflective of a trap in which a person gets, and it is very difficult to get out of this trap. The only way out for a middle class person is education and skill development, right? Skill development and education, any kind of skill, finance related skill, business related skill, but education and skill development is a way out of this poverty trap, but it is very difficult to get out of this poverty trap, right? This is what we need to understand in relation to poverty in our country. What are the various initiatives launched by the government? Of course, you must be knowing about them. MG Narega is one. Then Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana is one. Then Rural Employment Generation Program is one. Then Swarna Jyoti Gram Swarozgar Yojana, again a very important one. Pradhan Mantri Gramodaya Yojana. Then Antyodaya Anna Yojana. Then National Social Assistance Program and Indira Awas Yojana. Again, some of the initiatives, anti-poverty measures which are taken by the government of India. Now, these two diagrams which we saw, of course, you can note it down in your notes, in your class notes, in the personal notes which you make, and you can definitely draw them directly in your answer scripts. Of course, it will fetch you good marks if a question on poverty comes. Try to draw these diagrams or flowcharts. Now, moving on to the next topic, that is circular economy. A very simple and small topic. The Express interview, which is there in the newspaper, the guest talks about lead acid batteries being the best and successful example of circular economy, right? But what we need to understand, again, the broader picture is that what is the circular economy? What does it mean, right? So in relation to General Studies Paper 3, Environment Ecology, circular economy becomes very, very important, of course, for Indian economy as well, right? Before understanding circular economy, let us understand what do we call as linear economy, right? So linear economy, we are producing raw materials. Of course, there are raw materials, of course. We're extracting raw materials maybe. From those raw materials, we are doing the production process. Now, since we are doing the production, after that, we are using the products. Production makes the final outputs, we are using the products. After we use a product, then we generate a non-recyclable waste. For example, a Coke can, right? Coca-Cola can is there. The Coca-Cola can is made out of certain raw materials. Production happens, then I have a Coca-Cola can with me. I use it, and after that, a non-recyclable waste is created. And where does that Coca-Cola can go? In the bin, and maybe it is dumped somewhere, right? Non-recyclable. So again, reuse economy. In reuse economy, something happens. In reuse economy, let's say there is the raw material, production is of course there, usability is there, but after usage, some parts of the product, they can be recycled and again go to the production, right? But some part of the product, of course, again generates non-recyclable waste. That is a reuse economy, where some part of the products are reused. Then there is one economy, that is circular economy. Now, circular economy ensures that there is raw material. From raw material, production happens, then usage happens, and ultimately the product is totally recycled and it again goes to the production process as a raw material. That is what circular economy means. So what are the words used? Reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling the existing materials and products for as long as possible, increasing the durability of those products, is what we call as circular economy, where what goes in comes out and again goes in order to come out. A circular dimension is created, right? I hope that is very, very clear to all of you. Now, in relation to agriculture, also circular economy can be seen. In this diagram, you can see various processes. For example, digitally enabled knowledge sharing platforms, then digitally enabled asset sharing solutions, then resource efficient practices which are enabled by technology, then regenerative agriculture can be seen, right? Then returning nutrients to the agriculture system, digitized food supply chains, then peri-urban and urban farming can be seen. But more than this, in agriculture, if I have to talk about your circular economy, what comes into my mind is, first is sustainable agriculture practices that are very closely related to the circular economy in agriculture. Also, one more thing which comes into my mind is zero budget natural farming by Subhash Palekar, which includes processes such as Jeevamruta, Bijamruta, right? So, zero budget natural farming, again given by Subhash Palekar, is closely related to the circular economy being present in the agriculture. That is, raw materials are used to produce various products, the agriculture produce which we get, and that agriculture produce, once it is consumed, again the leftover part is again used as a raw material. So a circle gets completed. That is our circular economy. Now, coming to the last topic of today, that is Directorate General of Foreign Trade. So DGFT is looking to revamp trade rules of e-commerce exports in our country. In relation to General Studies paper 3 Indian economy, this topic becomes very, very important. Now, this Director General of Foreign Trade, first of all, it is responsible for formulation of export-import guidelines and principles for Indian Indian importers and exporters in the country, right? So it is responsible for what? For formulation of export-import guidelines and principles, regulating Indian importers and Indian exporters. Now, earlier, before 1991, it was known as Chief Controller of Import and Exports, that is CCI and E, right? Now it is known as Director General of Foreign Trade. Now, it is an attached office, of course, under Ministry of Commerce and Industry, again a very important fact, headed by your Director General of Foreign Trade. Now, is it a regulatory authority? It has been assigned the role of as a facilitator. This is a very important key factor, can be asked in your preliminary examination, right? So it has designatedly, it has been given the role of a facilitator, that you will facilitate foreign trade. And what will be the role? What will be the function? The function will be implementation of foreign trade policy. The last year only, when foreign trade policy of India came up, so it will be the responsibility of this DGFT to implement the foreign trade policy or the export-import policy with the main objective of promoting Indian exports in the world, right? Also, they will issue various scripts or various authorizations to the exporters, and they will monitor the corresponding obligations through the network of 24 regional offices as well, right? So, of course, they'll be issuing various scripts and authorizations to the exporters as well. Monitoring also will be happening through corresponding, that are they obligating through the network of 24 regional offices. And it, of course, it will be headquartered in New Delhi. This is about Directorate General of Foreign Trade. I hope this session was very, very useful and interesting for all of you. So all the very best. Have a nice day and study well. Good luck.